Okay, so let's go ahead and get started. If everybody can take a seat. So my name is Rob Gura. I'm a client service executive with Salesforce.com, and my focus is strategic accounts. And today we're talking about global deployments and the challenges that you can face and overcome with Salesforce. The title of this session is A Brave New World, Think and Act Globally. So what we really wanted to focus on through the course of this session is that it really doesn't matter how big or how small your company is. In this day and age, there's really a lot that every company has to take into account when they're rolling out Salesforce because of the world we live in today. With me today is Sean Jean from Avaya and Ryan Warble from Dell, and they're going to both be sharing their stories about how they approached the global deployments of their respective systems. This is our safe harbor statement. I'm sure that you've seen this at least a half a dozen times today, if not more, and the longer that you stay around the Salesforce family, the more you get used to seeing this. And I'm waiting for someone to come out with a T-shirt with actually the safe harbor statement just painted on the back, and just let that be that. So, at any rate, getting into the agenda here, what I want to focus on initially is talk about some of the events that have shaped the world that we live in today, and what's really fundamentally different about doing business today versus as recent as 30 years ago, and how these changes really drive our business climate and the things that happen today. As you're deploying Salesforce in a global capacity, you'll undoubtedly face some challenges, and we really want to talk about some of the best practices from the experts that have faced those challenges and overcome those challenges. So that's why we've got Dell and Avaya here, is to kind of share their story and how they rose to the occasion to overcome things. So as I said, I'm Rob Gura, client service executive. I'm also a certified administrator. So we live in a very different world. If we look at the world that we live in today versus our parents, there's some fundamental changes that have happened as a result of a few key events. First, in the 80s, we saw the end of the Cold War. We saw the fall of the Berlin Wall and the reunification of Germany. We're still continuing to see China slowly opening its doors and liberalizing and focusing on some of the capacities that happen outside of that communist union. And we also see, we saw the Russian Federation rise up out of the formation or the dissolvement of the Soviet Union. In addition, at the same time that was happening, we saw a number of organizations appear to really focus on the global commerce. So global trade and e-commerce. We saw the establishment of the European Union, as well as NAFTA, and then ultimately the World Trade Organization, that really free up and allow people to do business cross borders much easier than we could, back in the 70s or earlier. And ultimately, we saw this kind of come to a big conclusion. And I don't want to say conclusion, but we saw it come in the form of the big dot-com boom. That coupled with the Y2K bug and the growth of outsourcing and offshoring, and that whole concept of really looking at your business, no matter how big or small you are, you could be, your virtual team could span the entire globe. And that's really the point at which we really started to need to focus on truly global systems. So there's kind of the basics of a global deployment, things like focusing on language localization, the page layouts and the look and feels. Oftentimes those things are almost considered an afterthought. If your company is based in the United States or at least in North America, typically you'll deploy in English first and then go, oh yeah, can we do Spanish? Can we do French? Can we do Chinese? And then as you get into the languages that read differently, maybe they read right to left as opposed to left to right, and you need to think about how the page layout needs to be different beyond just the language strings being different. And then, of course, you always think about the currency conversion as well. As you deploy globally, of course, you're going to be doing business in one currency, and your headquarters is likely going to be in another part of the world, so you'll need to do some level of currency conversion. That's kind of the basics of deploying globally, but there's also things that you need to consider that aren't as obvious. Things like the local customs and practices, be it as simple as, calendar and time formatting, or name and address. People don't refer to states outside of the United States. They typically will refer to provinces, or maybe they have municipalities that are described in a different manner. And then we also really need to think about things about connectivity and mobility. We take it for granted, at least here in the westernized portion of the world, where internet is commonly available. But when we get down to the more rural regions, say in India or in Africa, we can't take bandwidth being available. So we need to start focusing on small form factor devices in the form of mobility. So with that, I'm going to turn things over to Ryan Warble and talk about the Dell story a little bit. Ryan is, I'll let Ryan introduce himself.
Hello? I'm good? Okay, I'm good. Thanks for having me. I want to talk a little bit about the Dell story around globalization, the way that we went about the practice of globalizing and rolling out the system, the epic, if you will, that we've taken over the past 2 years. We are deployed globally today. We have about 23,000 users on internally. We have about 50+ thousand partners that are registered. We rolled out initially just a core base application. We focused on what our primary needs were. It was around pipeline management. And kind of started with that to figure out how we could go quickly. And really from there, expanded functionality in phases. When we started out, we had over 30 different CRM systems around the globe. Big challenge, hard to manage, hard to run pipelines globally and kind of get a good look at your numbers. So that was a key driver for us in working through this. We had at least 6 master databases for customer, right? So not really master, but lots of regional databases. Trying to consolidate those into a single massive undertaking. So again, we're kind of focused solely on pipeline and how you get customer in. Regional processes. Every region, country, district, if you will, or nation, different processes around sales practices, around probabilities, around forecasting. Different things meant different things to different people. And really what happened was you couldn't aggregate all your data. Executive views did definitely not match what people were looking for. We had regional presidents that managed EMEA versus Asia versus US. They had specific needs. They didn't want to go global very often because it changed the way they were doing business locally. When it got up to the CEO level, at that point we had directives down that really said, okay, we need to globalize. We need to figure out how to do this because we can't run our business anymore in a regional mode. We're getting too big, and the world is kind of all coming back together on us. So how do you manage that? Our deployment today, as I said, pretty large user community, 63 countries, 4 major lines of business, and growing to a 5th right now. So large enterprise, public SMB, and in retail, we're actually building out a services line of business as well. So you've got different organizations, different ways to manage things, different needs, but you still have to have a maintainable system. So what does the solution look like? We support today English, Japanese, Korean. We did not roll out internal facing in all languages. It was somewhat unmanageable. We do a lot of releases, and constantly making those changes was hard. As a corporate policy, we don't necessarily require, we require in most countries English speaking, and we were able to use that from a speed standpoint to say, let's roll out in which languages are really required. It's not necessarily individual needs. Regional locales, that's absolutely critical. You have to be able to function that way. So date stamps, timestamps, headers, footers, salutations. 12,000 roles. Pretty tough to manage, but it is all integrated. So we do integrate all of our roles from our master data systems into Salesforce. Manages that. We do account changes frequently, and it really was critical to get that right. Some of the pieces that I think are kind of interesting when you look at our user count and our record count is where we did keep things simple. Total of 20 profiles. It's a pretty small number when you think about our number of users and the number of roles that we have. We really looked across the world and said, how different are these groups? Can they do the same things? Why is it so different in Europe versus the US? And it's really not. And I'll touch on some of those in a little bit. 3 account pages. You get to points when you're looking at all the different regions and you're talking to all the different sales organizations, and they say, we're different. We're so different. We do things differently here. It's crap, right? It's not. You got to filter through that. The country regulatory requirements really are not as tough as people say they are. I think if you ask the questions, you really find what the differences are, and they're minuscule. 3 opportunity pages. We have lots of record types. We have only 3 different pages regionally, though. We really restrict what the different changes are. we do manage a lot of variations through field level security. So there is ways to limit what you see so not everybody sees everything, but it doesn't necessarily have to be different page layouts. And when you're doing fast global deployments and rapid deployments, you can't be updating page layouts constantly. You really have to control that. And then kind of from that point, it really gives us the ability to move quickly and keep up with the business needs. One of the critical things we did to be able to roll this out and to be able to push back on a lot of the regionalizations was get that executive support. So getting executive buy-in at the beginning, basically saying we're going to focus on speed versus functionality, we're going to focus on globalization versus regional, and we're going to focus on standard versus custom. Okay, 3 critical areas that really helped us to push back on the business, to push back on the operations groups that all said that we're different. Blue sky methodology. You walk into a room full of sales reps, or you walk into a room full of operations people and you say, tell me what you need. You're dead. You can't manage a global deployment that way, especially large. Walk in with a solution and ask why it doesn't work. It's amazing when you go through and you put up the solution, you walk through the process and you ask, tell me why this doesn't work for you. And it's crickets. It really isn't that different. But the terminology might be different, but when they see the process and they see it you walk through the application, they kind of get it. Minimalizing the language and currencies, you have to do it to a certain extent. Certain countries do have requirements around it. It's not as bad as if people look at it. When you roll up a lot of your pipeline, eventually it all comes back into your headquarter dollars typically, so wherever that is. So you can minimize it in a lot of scenarios. A lot of times when you ask the question about how do you pull your pipeline, they manage it in headquarter dollars. Even if you're in China, it's headquartered in the UK, they roll it up in pounds very often. And then the big thing that you always get in global deployments is we have these country-specific requirements. If anyone's from Germany or France in here, I apologize, but you're a pain. Those are the countries that tell you we're so different. And you know what? You're not. It's the same thing. And a lot of those country regulatory requirements, when you actually push back and you go to the legal organizations and you go to some of these other groups, it's not any different. It's 10% of our total requirements, and I don't know how many thousands of requirements we implemented, 10% were regulatory. So how do we manage all of this? Watch my clock here. My global IT team, it's pretty good size, but we are regionally dispersed. So we have 10 people that are based in Austin, which is our headquarters. We have 25 people that are based out of Malaysia, and we have 10 people that are based out of India. Good size organization. That's project management, it's BAs, it's developers, and because we do work globally there, we can cover most of the time zones. We also have a very tight partnership with our business organization. So the operations organization or business automation organization that we have manages a lot of the other work for us. They have the support teams. They're tier 1 support. So we have, and I'll talk about the support structure in a minute. They have support reps that kind of really work within their business. They get back to us, and it filters a lot of information back. They've got project management and BAs, so they help us partner with the sales organization who will tell you, I need all of this, but I have no time to help you. Well, we use that organization to really help drive a lot of the business needs, and they filter back into the business. Reporting admins. We don't keep reports in IT. We keep reporting out of the business. We don't want to be, in the IT side, be managing all of the needs of reports, and there's a ton of them. Push it back into the business. Let them do it the way they want to. The approach that we've really taken on how we do this, globalizing around the world, right? We've got to look at how do we get this thing rolled out fast? How do we consolidate all of our systems? How do we roll up aggregate data? Really important to get there. Separate but equal. Being able to look at the segments by line of business is important, but at the end of the day, where are the differences? It's really not as big as they think. So field level security type things, we can limit some data elements so the pages aren't quite as messy. It's really, there's a lot of similarities that you find. That single user experience, so trying to consolidate the way that the system flows, consolidate other applications, or just managing the process flow. We want similar usage there. And then moving to a single sales portal, which is where we're going to next. We want to get really a portal that encompasses all of the different applications and different spaces that the sales organization uses, and give them a single place to go. It drives adoption and it drives usage. End-to-end integration. So really moving through the whole core set of systems is incredibly important, and what you don't want to do is have the duplication of data entry and duplication of processes in different places. You really want to have that driven. So as part of our sales portal approach, kind of having that single place to go, we're also looking at building an application layer behind that and kind of a web service layer. So all the data flows in, and it's automated throughout the user interface, but the systems are still disparate. But from a user perspective, it's still one place to go. Closed loop reporting. So one of the challenges is, how do I get all the reporting information back out? A lot of the reports that our organization wants to run, especially in a complex organization, Salesforce may or may not support, so running it back to the data warehouse. We really run everything back into an analytics engine so that you can get that reporting. We embed it up into the Salesforce application so that there's still a single place to go, but you need to look at where your reports really fit and how you get that closed loop so there's true information coming back. And then as we continue to move, we're getting towards more of the innovation and sales productivity. How do I give time back to their sales organization? How do we get time back to the rep? That's really the driver, and it's where we're going. So what does our infrastructure look like today? As I talked about, kind of consolidate and drive data, this is where we get to today. Salesforce has a large component, has a lot of the functionality, but we also have a lot of systems that touch it. Data is integrated in a lot of different ways, but again, we want to drive that single user interface. Support, so the aftermath. You start to roll this out, and now how do you support that? You really have to put a pretty strong structure in place, and we've had our glitches in that one, but we can keep coming back and trying to fix it. But you need a single place for reps to go from a support perspective. You need an organization that knows the business well and can answer, and then it gets back to IT. One of the drivers that we try and push back to the support organization is every time defects or trouble tickets come into IT or come into our development team, it takes away capacity from the next release. Try and solve it as far upstream as you can so that we can continue to move towards our releases. We have, with our business automation organization, they're that tier 1 support structure. So trouble tickets come in, it goes to the business automation team or the sales ops team. They try and resolve a lot of tickets. They have delegated admin access. They don't have full development access, but they can work through a lot of issues. It then goes to our standard global application support structure. They put it into Remedy, and they manage trouble tickets, and then they kind of distribute it out to where it needs to go. And then it comes into the IT development team. So minimizing how much churn happens out of IT allows you to keep moving forward with your roadmap. In doing that, you really have to require really strict rules around where the different pieces of the support go. So what we've done and we're continuing to do and refine is build out who handles what different in the support structure. What are the key things that each organization handles, and how do you kind of minimize that churn? And I know it's an eye chart, I apologize, but I think this will be distributed later at some point. Okay. So what are the key takeaways? Executive decisions and support. You can't do it without that. Sometimes it gets in the way, but you also need it. It's a necessary evil. You've got to think about speed versus functionality. You've got to think about global versus regional. And you have to think about standard versus custom. There's always time to go back and change things later, but what are the critical components, and what do you really need to roll it out the first time? Don't get fooled by the country-specific requirements. There are really not that many of them. You can push back, and you can typically get what you need out of that standard process. And really ask the question, why doesn't this work? It really allows you to push forward. It allows people to, when people see it visually, they have a blueprint to work from, they oftentimes say, yeah, that makes sense. And the 10% solution, the 10% problems, or the 3% problems where you spend 50% of your development time, they kind of go away. So I really encourage you to ask those questions. Okay. And I'll hand it off now to Sean.
Great. Thank you. So last year I was sitting in the audience. We hadn't deployed Salesforce. We were looking to do a pretty large-scale deployment in 6 months. Why not? I'm going to share with you basically the conversation that my boss kind of gave to me that scared me. So I'll share that with you in a second. The one thing that I will say Salesforce does really, really well is gets people in touch with the community. So I was able to actually learn a lot from Dell and the deployment there. And a lot of what Ryan just went through is spot on. I mean, it is invaluable. And this time last year, I was listening to other folks and really kind of leveraging the Salesforce community. And my rep helped facilitate that, the big guy in the back there, Bob. So, and that's enormously valuable. So just kind of going back to the kind of the context here, globalization. I don't think we can have a conversation about globalization without at least touching on the world is flat. For me, I picked this book up. It's pretty thick. I couldn't put it down. If there's one thing that you do when you leave here, if you've got a global deployment or if you're a global company, pick this up. Just read the first chapter. If you can put it down, great. I don't think you'll be able to. It is absolutely a phenomenal read and really helps crystallize what's happening around the world. And you really kind of understand what is meant by the world is flat. So what I'd like to do is actually have the author tell you a little story, and then we can, I think that'll set the stage for the rest of the conversation.
Iron rules of the world, a world of business, education, entrepreneurship, that immediately flows from this new flat world platform is this: whatever can be done will be done. There's only one question for you: will it be done by you or to you? That is the iron rule of the flat world. Whatever can be done will be done, because so many people now have so much communication and so many distributed tools of innovation that whatever will be done, whatever can be done will be done. If YouTube can be done, it will be done. Okay? If MySpace can be done, it will be done. If Facebook can be done, it will be done. And if you have an idea, promise me one thing: you won't wait. Because either it'll be done by you or to you. That is really the iron law of this world. So our family was down in Peru in June doing an eco tour. And we had a wonderful guy, the head of ecotourism in Peru. And one day mentioned he had a friend who sold Peruvian dishware from a village near Cusco on the internet. What a great thing. What a great flat world story. Peruvian villager sells dishware from Cusco on the internet. But here's the best part of the story. He told me the guy just discovered last year he could get his dishware made cheaper in China. So he's now arranging to have his Peruvian dishes manufactured in China, and he sells them from his village near Cusco on the internet. Oh, that's a guy, we laugh and I laugh, it's a funny story, but that's a guy who understands it can be done. So I better do it before somebody does it to me.
So, Peruvian dishes made in China, right? Who would have thought? So kind of to build on the opening of this, it's pretty dramatic what's happening, and it's happening very quickly. And the companies, every company's global, really, when you peel back all the layers. In today's world, every company's global, or they will be, or they'll probably not survive that long. So every deployment, in my opinion, should have at least a view of global if you're not already. I just gave a session, and I think that right before this, and I think that a lot of the principles that apply to any deployment apply to a global deployment. But kind of what I want to do real quick is just kind of give you an overview of Avaya and our go-to-market strategy. Then I want to share with you what we planned, what we did, some implementation considerations and lessons learned. Then I want to talk about Salesforce and the vision and value that we've adopted at Avaya. So, colors are a little different than what I remember, but baby blue's good. So Avaya is a global company, right? We do global communication solutions. That's what we do. We roll those out globally. We help companies communicate globally. Not so different from Salesforce when you're looking at a Salesforce rollout. So I've personally been involved with a couple global rollouts of communication solutions, and we follow a pretty simple principle. And the principle is that we want to flatten the different rule sets, and we want to flatten those and condense those as much as we can. We want to consolidate functionality into a central place, flat rules, consolidate into a central place, and then we want to extend from that core out globally. That's how we roll out communication solutions at Avaya. Flatten, consolidate, and extend. So for Salesforce, very similar approach. We need to flatten the rules. We need to flatten those global rules, right? Why are there so many? Let's flatten those. Let's get them to a manageable set. And you'll never get them all aligned globally, but you need to get them to a reasonable point. Let's consolidate functionality around Salesforce and have that be kind of our central launching pad for everything the company does, quite frankly. And let's extend that out globally. And let's empower our teams globally to leverage this tool. So here's our continuum. We're right on track here. Again, we're in our 4th release where we have a, well, I'll share with you the actual scope that we delivered. So this is my boss. I went in literally, and this is a true story. And if you were in the last session, I apologize, but my wife loves this story because she had to cancel the vacation. So I went into his office, and he was wearing a different tie that day, which is good. But he basically told me the same thing. He told me, this is what we're going to do. He's telling you what we did. But he said, this is what we need to do. I was going in to tell him I was taking the next 2 weeks off because I had accrued that much vacation, and quickly realized that I needed to cancel that because we needed to do a pretty big deployment of Salesforce in 6 months globally. So let me share with you in his words what we did.
Functionality to 3,300 CRM users and 1,100 PRM users, all in 6 months. This was a task that had never been done by any other Salesforce.com customer and was critical for Avaya's success. This solution is now being prepared to scale up to 50,000 users.
So 3,300 users, 50,000 partners, platform for 50,000 partners, all in 6 months. So, pretty big task, right? So I'm going to share with you what we did, and then we took a lot of licks along the way, and we learned from those. We tried to learn from those. We tried to have some pretty open, honest communication, and basically, I think I can encapsulate this into 3 main points, and I want to try to be succinct because I know you're all getting a lot of information. And I'll crystallize these as we go through it. Governance, right? So you need to make sure that you have clear accountability for what you're going to deliver and ownership for what you're going to deliver, right? Critical. Have an escalation path, because escalation's good. Escalation's a good thing. If you're trying to get consensus or you're trying to roll out a global solution, you want to make sure you're not muting anybody, because maybe they know something that somebody else doesn't know. You don't want it to be a free-for-all, but you need to at least account for it. Have a view of what you're rolling out, because a lot of times, at least at Avaya, there were folks that didn't know what Salesforce was, right? They didn't even know what the platform was. So they're being asked to define the requirements for a technology they'd never seen before. It's a hard thing to do, right? And of value. So make sure that they understand what they're building with. What's their tool set? What are their Legos, if you will? And then third, give them the information to make the decisions based not only on time and cost of requirements, but on business value. So governance, let them see what the tools that they're building with, and make sure they have the information that they need. And I know this doesn't align with the slide, oh well. And make sure you give them the information that they need to make well-informed decisions. And I'm going to share with you kind of how we did that at Avaya. So first of all, our release 1 that we rolled out from November to April, pretty robust CRM functionality. Again, this is our platform release for PRM functionality. Everything that we do and everything that we did, we tried to start with some fundamental questions. Why are we doing it that way? Right? Does this work globally? What's the value? So we kind of wanted to have those questions answered up front. And this is what we did in our release 2. We took a little bit of a break. And our release 3, and we're in the midst of release 4, which, by the way, is literally at the tip of the spear of Avaya's corporate strategy. We're moving to a more channel-focused go-to-market strategy, and PRM is at the tip of the spear. Can't be more important, and we have to do it right. We have to roll this out right. And when I say it, there's a Salesforce as part of it, right? It's a business process. Can't ignore that, right? So it's not just the tool, it's the people and the process in the tool. Right? And I know that sounds goofy and everybody's like, yeah, of course. But you got to kind of think about that. You're not rolling out a tool, you're rolling out a solution. and it's got to be built around a process, and you need to make sure you understand that process. So that's kind of what we did, and for release 1, and I'm going to share with you, again, those 3 things: governance, making sure that folks understood what the tool was, and making sure that they understood and had the right information to base decisions. So this is another person. This is my business counterpart who leads our PRM practice. And I'm going to let her tell you about the IT approach that we use, because if I told you, you'd say, well, yeah, of course, you're in IT, and you say it's good, and of course, you're going to say it's good. So I'll let her tell you that it's good, and then I'll just smile.
We're rolling.
So one of the things that we did after our first release was to consider what we could do differently to ensure our success for subsequent releases. And so what we undertook was a conference room pilot approach, which meant that I could sit down as a business owner side by side with the development team and talk about what my requirements were. And that was really useful because then we could have an open dialogue and talk about what I was asking for. They could ask clarifying questions. And as they were doing that, they were actually starting to make some of the changes right into the environment. So I could actually see what I was asking for take life and ensure that my expectations were aligned with what they were about to deliver. And I think that was really helpful to ensure that they understood what we were asking for. Another concept that was brought to our methodology was the requirements tracking tool, which the team used to capture our requirements, develop a very fact-based level of effort estimate, and the fact that it was presented in a very easy to understand fashion. I could see it graphically. I could understand what new change requests I was asking for and what it would mean to the overall release, meant that I could easily understand what the impact was and help to ensure that we were making very timely decisions to control the budget and the scope.
So she hit on 2 of the 3 things I want to talk about. Let me give you some tangible examples here. So she mentioned this CRP approach, conference room pilot approach. Pretty simple stuff. It's not rocket science, but it works. Basically, what we do is we start with, what is the as-is process? Business owner, kind of what's your process? What do you have today? What do you want it to be tomorrow? Now let's talk about the tool that we have that can enable that process. And let's make sure we understand, this says scope, it's really requirements. So let's make sure we understand what your ask is. And let's all align on that. Let's make sure we have a clear view of what we're going to be designing and what we're going to be building. And let's agree to it, at least in principle. Now, at each one of these phases, you get a little bit closer to what the actual end result is. But what you don't want to have is you don't want to have surprises, right? So you don't want to have somebody going, oh, geez, I didn't expect it to do this, or I didn't know it was going to do that. No, let's start with, here's your process, here's what it is today, here's what you're looking to do. Let's pull up Salesforce, let's sit down together, we'll pull it up, we'll have it in front of us, we'll have the process over here, and we'll walk through and we'll show you how, typically what we do is we would start with standard functionality, where we could, globally. Right? So here's what Salesforce does out of the box. Will that accommodate the process? Of course, the answer is no, right, for pretty much any company. That's one of the beautiful things about Salesforce, is you can build it to your business, right, versus some of the traditional ERPs where you built your business around the tool. You build the tool around your business, right? But you don't want to be too flexible. You want to kind of flesh out the process and make sure that what you're building makes sense. So we start with that, and then we ask why. Why do we need to do this requirement? Well, we need to do this requirement because I is different, and this is what we need, and this is the way we drive our business, and this is an important area strategically. Here's roughly the business value, right? And it doesn't have to be, quantitative. It could be qualitative. Some things just make sense, right? So we say, okay, great. Standard functionality. I see that this won't work. We need to build something here. Here's a requirement. I'm going to talk about how we capture those and how we make sure that we can articulate clearly and transparently what the requirement is and the level of effort associated with that, because we actually use Salesforce to deliver Salesforce. So I'll show you some examples of that in a minute. And then we had a formal sign-off, right? So at each one of these phases, so at the end of the requirements phase, we sit down and we say, okay, are we good? Are we all good? This is what we've kind of outlined. This is our target. It's not 100% right. We know that it's going to be probably 80, 90% right, and there's going to be some changes. But before we move on, are we good? Sometimes we got a yes. More often than not, we got a no, which is okay. which is okay. Globally, we might get a no. We might get somebody who puts a stake in the ground and says, no, this is completely wrong. We're a growing emerging market, and we need it this way. Well, you know what? I want to hear that. But let's have it be fact-based. We can't have opinions. We can't have something subjective. We need to have it fact-based. What's your business case? So here's the requirement. Here's the time and cost of that requirement. What's the return? Let's escalate it. If we can't come to terms, let's escalate it in a fact-based way. And I'll show you the tool that we used to do that. And let's have our management team decide if we can't come to terms. Did we have to do that a lot? No. But we did have to do it, and it was there, and it's a good thing. Because I'll tell you what, you want to find those things out here versus after you've rolled it out. Right? You want to flesh those out in your requirements phase, not in, okay, we rolled it out, and geez, we missed a big emerging market. Why didn't we do it this way? Right? Let's hit it here. Let's find that out here. So the next phase is design. So requirements, understand, here's kind of what you want. Here's what the basic standard functionality looks like. Now we're a little bit closer. Now we've actually kind of designed something that we can kind of play with and look at. So we heard what we need. We heard what we need to do. Now we've kind of done a mock-up. We've built it. How's it look? Are we on target? No, you need this, whatever. There's some adjustments. And then we have that formal sign-off. And we have this formal governance process, and we have the escalation. Which, by the way we organized the teams is we had a single global lead for each, quote, capability. So we had basically work packets. So if you think about if we're rolling out a PRM, let's talk about PRM for a second. We might have opportunity registration. We might have lead distribution to partners, right? We might have these certain areas of functionality. We want to get to a global solution, but if you try to get consensus, probably, unless you have a lot of time, it's a hard thing to do. So you need to have that one focal point, your global lead. And you need to definitely get the input from the other folks. And then you need to have that global lead try to be the tiebreaker. And if somebody feels really strongly about something, let's listen to them. Let them make their case, and maybe that's the right thing to do. Again, didn't do it a lot, didn't have to follow that next level of escalation a lot, but it was there, and we encouraged people to use it. We encouraged the debate in the requirements, and even in the design session. It's okay. Let's find it then. So, again, formal kind of sign-off. We okay, we're good, yep, check, let's move on. Let's actually build it. Now you'd think, right, so we've done all these checks, and you'd think, oh, everything's going to be beautiful. This, we're all aligned, we're all singing a happy song at the end of build. Well, no, right? There's always going to be things that we need to tweak and adjust, and we plan for that. Right? So don't kid yourself that you're going to, in my opinion, if you approach this with an iron fist and you force things, you could get yourself in trouble. You could miss an opportunity. You could end up with a rollout that maybe isn't optimized. It's a balancing act, right? Because you got to do it quick too. So that's basically the CRP process. Again, requirements or scope, design the solution, build the solution, checkpoints at each phase, make sure you have a clear, crisp governance process and escalation channel, leverage that, use that to ultimately come up with a better solution. So, because I planned things really, really well, this is actually behind the firewall, so I couldn't bring it up live in the session. We did that like last week. I should have changed my profile to an admin, but that's a long story. I know you can't see this. Let me describe for you what this is. This is the tool we used to facilitate these sessions. So we'd sit there, we'd say, okay, this is the process, this is what you want, we need to do this requirement, and this is a better way to do it. And then we'd actually go in and by each capability area, we would log the requirement. And we would go back, and then we would, base an estimate, a level of effort around each requirement. And we put a business case around each requirement. Right? So now we have a clear view. We have the facts. Here's what you said you needed. Here's the time and cost for it. Now we can make decisions. Now we can start to make decisions, because I'll tell you what, the list is always going to be longer than what you can do. But now we've got folks like Zoe, who you heard, who can make those fact-based decisions. And we've got the data that if there is an escalation, we can make a decision like that, because it's a math problem. It's easy. It's clear. So this just shows the list of requirements We also use the tool to facilitate these sessions and these meetings. So these are kind of the meeting minutes and action items so that everybody knew what requirements were given by who. Everybody knew what actions and tasks they needed to close out. And the other thing that we made sure that we tracked were issues and tasks. So everybody on the team, every capability lead could go into this tool at any given time and see exactly what they owned and what they were responsible for and what we were going to be delivering. Oh, I'm sorry, the second one was the business requirements. So you kind of align the business requirements to the capabilities. So, you know, just kind of some of the more standard stuff, and I don't want to echo a lot of this because I think Ryan did a great job of covering this in his section. And again, we copied a lot of what they did because they did it right. And so, you know, we wanted one team, you know, one set of master data, one process, and full transparency. We needed to be one team. We couldn't have an IT team, a systems integrator, or a partner that we used, and a business team. It wouldn't work, right? Everyone's going to be kind of trying to cover themselves. We needed one team who trusted each other. We needed to be fully transparent, open, and honest, and fact-based. Let's remove the emotions. Let's get to the facts, right? Because when you get to the facts, things become very clear. And if you don't have the facts, it's okay to say, hey, I don't have the facts. We got to get the facts. And then you get them, and then you can make a decision. But it just, I think that approach helped remove a lot of the churn and a lot of the angst and a lot of the concern globally. And if a decision was escalated, at least the voice was heard, and any risks associated with that were logged and known. So we weren't going in blind. Nothing was, the element of surprise, we want to minimize the element of surprise from concept to rollout. Training, communications, and post-go-live support are critical. One of the really, so two things from my perspective that Salesforce does that is of extreme value. One, it enables a conference room pilot approach because you can make changes so quickly. You can do those configurations. It's flexible enough to do that. It's designed to do that, and you won't touch your core code. You're only touching the metadata. So you have that flexibility to do those things quickly. So that's one thing. The other thing that's of value is, from an administration perspective, you can have regional leads do your admin, right? You can have the business do certain things within the tool. It's okay. It's not going to break. Nothing bad's going to happen. So, you know, post-go-live support, we were actually able to put some of the post-go-live, and we still do, within the region. Right? Maybe there's language barriers, whatever. Maybe there's cultural things. Maybe there's something that we need to do in a maintenance release coming up. You know, inevitably, you're never going to roll this out perfect the first time. You're going to have tweaks. Let's get those in. Let's get those from the region leads. Who better to get those from? Right? And let's figure those out. Same way, fact-based. What's the requirement? What's the business value? What's the rationale? Do we have you know, general alignment that it makes sense? Training, obviously, is key from a global perspective, and then communications. I'll go back to that. Actually, I'm missing a slide. So I wanted to kind of share the vision of Avaya and how we leverage Salesforce. So the vision is, I mean, an IT guy, right? So it's a database. It's a database that captures the most important information to any company. It captures where your reps and your partners touch your customers. It captures the data about what they're buying, how they're buying, what they like, what they don't like, how long it takes them to make a decision, why it takes them so long to make a decision. Maybe they don't like the way you're shipping something, right? So it's that critical point it's paramount to any company. And Salesforce helps us manage that. So we start with the strategy, right? And then we leverage Salesforce to execute that strategy through account plans, through partner plans. Then we're going to communicate, we're going to actually monitor the activity around the execution of those plans. And we're going to drive results. And at each point, we should be checking back, hey, is this aligned with our strategy? Are our activities, are our plans that we're saying that we want our partners and our frontline sales folks to do, Are we really doing what we want from a strategic perspective? Sounds simple. We weren't. Imagine there's some companies that, maybe it's not perfect. But you can actually tangibly put it there. You can see it. Now, the activities that you're doing around that plan, do they align, right? Are you presenting something that maybe isn't aligned with your strategy or aligned with your plan? Well, with Salesforce, you can actually go in and see it. So you look at an opportunity and you say, geez, what's going on in this opportunity? Why didn't it close? What's going on? Let me go in. Let me see. Well, geez, their presentation, this isn't at all our strategy. They're selling something totally different. Why are they doing that? Or, better, geez, this opportunity, wow, we had a great win. What did they do? Let's go back. Let's look. Let's check the activities. Well, here's what they did. They called this person. They showed them this. This is what they saw. They saw value in this. We never thought anyone would see value in this. Let's take that back and put it into our strategy. Right? And what you end up with in this end state vision is a strategy based on results and results based on a strategy. Let's take the mystery out of it, right? So it shouldn't be by happenstance. It should be controllable. We should be able to control our business to a certain degree, right? We should be able to monitor and control how our companies are received globally and how our companies operate and go to market globally and feed those back into the strategy. It's a continual cycle. I guess one of the equations that I like is, strategy void of execution doesn't get you anywhere. Some key takeaways, again, some pretty dramatic things happening in the world at a very fast pace. Tools and the viral adoption of things like Salesforce and the community of Salesforce are kind of the next new thing. You hear about Chatter and you hear about some of the things that Salesforce is rolling out. It aligns with how the world's going to operate. I know my kids text. That's all they do. As a matter of fact, 16-year-old who has to get a ride from the person who lives right across the street. Said, hey, is Jason giving you a ride? Well, I don't know. Well, why not? Well, I posted a question on his Facebook, and I texted him, and he didn't respond. So I took her over to the door. I opened it. I said, his house is right there. Never occurred to her to actually pick up the phone or walk over. It's a different paradigm. People are going to be, the generations are changing, I think, in how we interact, and I think Salesforce is at the front of that. And it's global. Language and currencies are not the only considerations. We talked a little bit about some of the other considerations, and education and support, obviously, critical. And I think Ryan hit it really well where he said, debunk the myths. So we had a similar experience, and quite frankly, I knew to look for it because of some of the community of Salesforce that I had spoken with. There really aren't that many regulatory differences. Really not as different as we think. You're going to get some people that are passionate and fiery that we are that different. Get the facts. I think you'll find a similar thing to what Ryan and I found. It's not that different. It is different. It's not that different. And with that, I think we can take some questions.
Yeah. So at this point, if you want to queue up to the microphone so we can get any questions recorded. But we've seen some really similar or parallel kind of things happen at Avaya and Dell as they were going through the course of their deployments. And I think what you'll find is as you deploy your system globally or move from a regional deployment to a global deployment or what have you, you'll find that you encounter a lot of these same things. You'll really want to focus on keeping it simple, making variations of the application as few as possible, and really focus on a global standard. People will, argue passionately about, being different and the way we sell is different and that type of thing. But in order to have, kind of reap the benefit of a global system, you really need to do as much as possible the same. And, the key variances being, language and currency and regulatory practices and that type of thing. So with that, I'd like to open it up to questions. Someone over here. So.
Yeah, my question's for Ryan. I think it was on slide 14 that you had the statistics of your deployment, which referenced 20 roles, but 12,000 profiles. Sorry, the other way around. 20 profiles and 12,000 roles. and the profiles were broken out between what was CRM and PRM. Do you have the similar stats for that from the roles? Was it the volume of PRM users that increased the roles, or was it more the globalization? Because 12,000 roles seems a very large number.
It's a pretty large number. The channel organization just does some things a little bit differently. So that's really what's driving it. I don't think it's based on volume. I think it's just based on process for the channel organization. So the sales organization, the internal sales organization operates very similarly around the world and really let us reduce that number. Channel's different, and a lot of times in channel, you're at the will of whim of your partners, and they don't always do things exactly the same.
Typically a role for a partner, and those partner users get attached to it.
Partners, and also internally, how you manage channels are a little bit different. So you have different channel ops organizations versus standard sales ops.
Okay, great, thank you.
You know, something else that's kind of interesting about the Dell deployment, Ryan mentioned that they've only got, 3 languages deployed internally, English, Japanese, and Korean. But when we went to roll out the channel solution, very different equation there. There you can't really ask everybody in the world to, can you just switch languages and talk English? So I think the PRM portal supports upwards of 30 languages, 25, 30 languages, yeah.
More than 30? Yeah, it's a larger number. It's a very large number. So we are very much regionalized from a external business-facing perspective. So we have no choice. You have to manage your partners a little bit differently.
So, all right. It doesn't look like there's any other questions, so we'll wrap it up there and let you get to your various happy hours and parties and that type of thing. So, thank you all for attending.
Thank you.